Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan coming here to you from the El Paso airport, where I was planning on talking about investment into the United States and the future of the electronics sector. But earlier in the day, the Russian government announced the full planned withdrawal of all troops from the Kherson pocket, which is the only chunk of territory in occupied Ukraine that is to the west of the Dnieper River, which is roughly analogous to the American Mississippi. So reports at this point indicate that the Russians are withdrawing at full speed from all positions. At the moment, it does not seem to be a rout, but keep in mind that it's about 2 a.m. local time, so that could change, and it probably will.
From propaganda billboards plastered all over Kherson City to fiery speeches by Russian and Moscow-appointed officials, the mantra repeated over much of the past year was the same: Russia is here forever. But such declarations invite mockery these days, as tens of thousands of Russian servicemen hastily pulled out of the capital of the eponymous southern region on Thursday, with Ukrainian troops entering it a day later. Russia's retreat from the largest urban center it captured since it invaded Ukraine marks a tectonic shift in the war, gives a boost to the faltering Ukrainian economy, and further undermines Moscow's geopolitical prestige in the countries of the former Soviet Union and beyond. Peter Zeihan, geopolitics expert and the author, has something to say about this unprecedented development.
A few things to keep in mind. The Ukrainians announced they were assaulting this area 4 months ago, and so the Russians forward positioned a lot of troops. Based on whose statistics you're looking at, there's somewhere between 20 and 40,000 Russian forces in the area, but it's generally accepted on both sides that these are the best troops that the Russians have with the best training and the best equipment. Now, the Russians have not been able to effectively supply this area for about a month because a month ago someone blew up the Kerch Strait Bridge, which is the only heavy rail connection that can handle freight transport from Russia proper to the southern front. So whether it's equipment or ammo or fuel or reinforcements, everything now has to come in by truck, and the Russians have lost the vast majority of their tactical truck support fleet for the military and are now using civilian vehicles, making them very vulnerable. In terms of what that has meant for the war, it means that not enough shells and not enough fuel have been getting to the front in the Kherson pocket. So there are more than isolated reports that Ukrainian forces for the last couple of weeks have not had to do something that's called shoot and scoot. Normally, when you fire an artillery shell, you need to get the hell out of there because somebody tracked your shell's outgoing trajectory and they send a return present to you that will blow up your position unless you've moved. So you shoot and then you scoot. But apparently there's been no return fire coming from Russian positions, so the Ukrainians have just been able to plug away with whatever ammo they have. As to whether this is going to be a rout, we should probably figure that in. The Ukrainians are being presented with a golden opportunity. Even if it's only 20,000 Russian troops that are here, they're now all in a state of retreat, and they all have to go to the same places. There are only 2 bridges across the river, and the Ukrainians have excellent intelligence on the entire zone. So if the Russians put up a pontoon bridge, it usually only lasts for a few minutes before it gets taken out. So really, all of the Russians need to go on the same roads and the same intersections, which are all going to be massive kill zones, until they reach the bridgeheads, one of which is at Kherson City and the other one which is at the dam at Nova Kakhovka. At that point, well, the Ukrainians have been hitting these bridges with rocket fire for weeks, and they can't handle heavy equipment anymore, which means that the Russians are going to have to make a massive parking jam at the bridgehead, dismount, and then run across while under artillery fire the entire time. The casualties are going to be immense. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is something that's going to be really nasty. We're looking at really one of the biggest military routes of forces that we have seen since the early months of World War II, in addition to a massive transfer of equipment from the Russian army to the Ukrainian army. Best guess is that not only are the Russians going to be leaving behind their best gear, but they're going to be leaving behind more gear than what the Ukrainians captured from the Russians in the Izium assault back in September, which already transferred more gear to Ukraine than NATO had in the previous 7 months where Ukraine began the war with. So by spring, with a lot of deferred maintenance, the Ukrainians are likely to enter the war by May with a tank and artillery force that's more than 5 times its strength on the first day of the war. The Russians have already used the majority of their missile and tank forces, which began this war as the world's largest. So the Kherson withdrawal and the likely route to come does mark the end of any hope the Russians had of regaining any sort of strategic initiative or any sort of meaningful offensive operations until at least May. It'll take them at least that long to bring in fresh troops and fresh gear. In that time, the Ukrainians are not going to sit on their hands. They don't have to cross the river to strike at the Russians. Once they get to the river, their long-range rockets and artillery are going to be able to target the isthmus, which is only about 3 kilometers wide, that connects the Ukrainian mainland to the Crimean Peninsula. And that matters for more than just mere military logistics. Because the Kerch rail bridge is out, Russia cannot only not bring in ammo and troops and fuel, it can't bring in food. Their only other option are some very light rail and road connections across that isthmus coming from the rest of occupied Ukraine, all of which Ukraine will still be able to strike, or will soon be able to strike. And in capturing Kherson, the Ukrainians are going to be able to cut the water flows to the Crimea Canal, and water from that canal is solely responsible for 3/4 of the food grown in Crimea. So no imported food, little grown food. Russia is either going to have to evacuate the entire peninsula by car across the Kerch Bridge's remaining road span, or suffer a 1980s Ethiopia-style famine. Ugh.
Moreover, Russia's losses in Ukraine, as well as the West's stance towards Ukraine, are being closely monitored by China. Beijing is watching Russia's actions in Ukraine and tries on the consequences that affect Russia, assuming what they could mean to China in case it chooses to invade. China and Taiwan are not our topics for today, although we would be visiting the topic in the future. What is your honest take on the person's withdrawal? Is Russia playing a game no one knows about, or did they just lose? Let us know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.